Step 1. Don't give us everything in the first movie. Now, Disney seemed to be playing all of their cards with this film just to try to win everyone over for their new trilogy. First, they gave us an undefeatable First Order, which was defeated in this movie. They gave us this formidable new villain who Rey defeated with no training whatsoever. They gave us a super tough Captain Phasma, and the only thing she did in this entire film was one huge, irredeemable act of cowardice. I mean, she single-handedly caused the destruction of their entire superweapon. Nothing she could possibly do in the sequels could redeem that one act in this film. And then there's the Starkiller base itself. Now, it seems like it would be absolutely impossible to top the threat that base presented in the sequels. And that's a problem that the original trilogy had as well. The first movie gave us the Death Star, and the second one didn't even attempt to give us a bigger threat, so they simply made it more of a character-based drama that focused more on personal stakes. And then the third movie, Return of the Jedi, came, and they gave us another Death Star. And so this new trilogy could have avoided that if they just started with personal stakes and built up to the threat, built up to that Starkiller base. And it's only made worse by the fact that the Resistance had such a huge, decisive victory against the First Order within this film. And it seems to me that that would really downplay the threat of the First Order for the rest of the trilogy. Step 2. Give us a new threat. Now in Step 1, we mentioned how we did not need to see this copy of the Death Star in this movie. It could have been saved for the later movies, but at the same time, we didn't really need to see it at all. Almost everything in this movie we've seen before. In fact, we've had 2 Death Stars just in the original trilogy alone. And so it would have been a lot cooler to see something new in this film. And one thing that we have not seen before is an army of Sith. I mean, everything else in this movie we've had. We've had Star Destroyers. We've had Death Stars. We've had Stormtroopers. We've had British generals that are running the show. We've had an evil dark side user in a black mask. What we have not seen is a whole bunch of people wielding red lightsabers and using the dark side of the Force. So it would be really cool and a really formidable threat for this film. And it could also be used to build up the rivalry between General Hux and Kylo Ren. Now you have Hux on one side, he has his stormtroopers, he thinks they're good enough for the First Order. And then you have Kylo Ren, who thinks that the stormtroopers are weak, and the only way for the First Order to succeed is with his own Knights of Ren. And even if we stick with the Death Star, it's really important to add emotion to the actions of that Death Star. Now, we've seen a Death Star destroy a planet. We've seen a Death Star destroy big ships full of people. But we've never had any emotional attachment to who or what was destroyed in episodes 4 and 6. And so in episode 7, if we see that destruction, we should have an emotional attachment to whoever was destroyed. We should care about that planet and the characters on it. And that leads to Step 3. Step 3. Make it clear to the audience what the setting is. Now, this movie was obviously trying to distance itself from the prequels, in that it did very little to explain any of the politics of what was going on. But in this case, we needed a lot more than what we actually got. It needs to tell us how the First Order came to be, how it developed, why they hate the New Republic. It needs to help us to understand the relationship between the New Republic and the Resistance, why the Resistance needs to work outside the New Republic, why the New Republic doesn't see the First Order as a threat. And it's obvious when you look at like the deleted scenes and the novelization of this film that those details were actually developed for the script. You can find all of the answers online if you go looking for them, but they still should have been included in the film itself. Step 4. Cut down on the coincidences. Much of the plot of this movie depended on the coincidences that you see in it. Poe just happened to be on the planet where Rey was. Han just happened to come across Rey and Finn as they were leaving Jakku. Maz just happened to have Luke's lightsaber, which was exactly what Rey needed to connect to the Force and have her visions. R2-D2 just happened to have the perfect piece of the map to find Luke. And there are ways to cut down on these coincidences, many of which involve using the Force. Instead of having everyone look for a map to Luke, for example, just have them looking for him. And that leads them both to Jakku because of Rey. Leia senses that Rey has a connection to Luke, and Kylo Ren senses the same thing. So instead of being after this specific map, they're after Rey because they know that she has a connection to him. And then that connection that Rey has is what eventually leads her to finding him at the end of the movie. Step 5, make the ending less anticlimactic. Now, the ending of this movie could, in a sense, be compared to The Empire Strikes Back. Everyone is finally safe, and now they have to go off and find so-and-so. Now, the difference is, if The Empire Strikes Back was like The Force Awakens, it would have ended with Leia unfreezing Han in Jabba's palace and staring into his eyes. Now, that would have been anticlimactic, because you wouldn't have been able to leave the theater dreaming of what they're going to do to go off looking for Han and finding him and saving him. In the case of The Force Awakens, just cutting off about 2 minutes would have really built up much more anticipation for the sequel. You would have been more excited about what's going to happen in the next movie. You have Rey, who realizes that she's special. She's going off to find the only person in the galaxy who can help her to understand what's so special about her. So will it be easy for her to find him? What will happen when she does? And even if Episode 8 were to answer those questions quickly, briefly, simply, it would still be more satisfying to wait for those answers and to get them in the next movie than to have them handed to you at the end of this film. Hello and welcome to How to Fix Cinema. Last